Hi, this is Raj from MR Sportscars. In this video I'm going to talk to you specifically about what to look for when buying a 911 Targa. In this case this is a 997 Gen 2 Targa 4S. This video will probably apply to 997 Gen 1s as well as 997 Gen 2s. They have this unique roof mechanism which you do need to be aware of what to look out for on those, but also I'll go through general tips on what to look out for because it's a 997 Gen 2, as well as some of it applying to the 997 Gen 1s, which are also fabulous cars. So this car here is a 2010 Gen 2 Targa 4S, so it's got the 3.8 litre flat 6. It's finished in Meteor Grey. It has some lovely options including the PDLS headlights. So they have a different headlight design because they have cornering headlights that are xenons. The standard lights are also bi xenons, but these have got the rotating main beam. So I'll first go into things to look out for the roof. So obviously make sure that the roof is fully working. So you have an additional switch here to open that rear section, so make sure that actually activates it and it lifts all the way. These can be quite expensive if you need to replace them, so make sure it does stay up. If the gas struts have gone, then they will need to be factored into price. And then all of this area here should be in really nice clean condition, particularly these sections here. So these are a very fragile cloth, which I've seen on some cars have actually been torn. So it's okay that they've got those slight perforations there. That's actually for the mechanism itself when it goes down, but that should all still be there. I've seen one where that's all hanging down on one side. I can't imagine that would be a very easy thing to repair. Check that all these drain areas, so it does actually drain water through this section here, down here, along here. Make sure that this is all clean and these drain holes here are free of any debris that could block and potentially flow water into the rear area of the car and in the lower part of the footwell there. So, and that also should, if you just drop it, it should engage itself. So it's a soft close mechanism. Make sure that's working. There is also a blind. So there's a sun blind that comes across. Make sure that is working as well. So you push that. Oh, you need to power up the car. So let's put the key in. I guess make sure it's got the two keys as well. So make sure that's working as it should. Goes all the way evenly, and then it will go all the way back without any issues, any noise or scraping or anything like that. And again, just look at the whole mechanism there, make sure it's all okay. Now in terms of water ingress, make sure, so there's under the mat there should be a break in the carpet, and you can look at the foam and see if it's this lovely cream colour rather than black covered in dried mold or even wet mold. That's the ideal. Feel that it's actually, this foam hasn't filled with water, because what happens is if those rear drains block, then potentially water will flow into this area. It will flow under the seats, which you can lift because they're velcro, and you can feel all of this area here for any water, and also look for any water damage as well. So staining if it's got a light interior like this. So yeah, as I said, feel in both sides of the car, so you can do the same on the other side as well, just down there. And then in terms of when you're buying one of these cars, you also want to check that all the leathers are in good condition. There's not too much scraping along here. Again, it is inevitable that there will be a little bit there. Check this area here, because it's quite common for people to miss the seatbelt buckle and sort of catch the edge of the centre console, and if it's this soft plastic finish, then it will sort of chip. Likewise around the window switches, if someone with long nails has been using those, then this area will chip up as well. And also check sort of all the levers around all the touch points, so the PDK selector or manual gearbox if it's one of those. or check the levers around the steering wheel. Check also the door cards. Obviously if the car hasn't been washed, this is going to be dry, but check if it's been out in the wet that this isn't full of water, so waterlogged here. If it has, then it's likely that the inner door membrane has failed, and obviously check both sides of that. I also make sure that there's not any big areas of damage on the windscreen. Repairs are fine as long as they've been done properly, and also check that all the rubbers line up nicely, that there's no gaps between the metal and the windscreen, because otherwise you could get wind noise and you could potentially get leaking water into the cabin. So check that this roof seal, this window seal, is also in nice condition. I always make sure that the wipers are also in good condition. If they're not, then I replace them. This plastic quite often fades. We use a product, a G-Technique product, which restores that back to that lovely sort of satin black grey finish. Same with these can fade as well. Lights particularly, they can suffer with going the plastic outer surface degrading with sun damage, so they can go very yellow. They can be polished up, but basically if they go so far, then you might actually need whole new lenses, and there are companies that now replace just the cover and split the headlight unit, put a new cover on. You can also sand them down and re-lacquer them. This one has got very good ones. The rear is also another big point, particularly on these Targas, because they're all four-wheel drive, so you have this rear light bar here. Quite often you will see cracks forming where sun damage again has caused it to expand and contract, and then it has actually started to split. Sometimes you see water ingress in that as well. Bear in mind that that part now currently is around £1,100, and it's just a piece of plastic. It hasn't got any lighting in it. Likewise, the lights, they're very common for those to sort of start looking crazed, so with tiny little micro cracks in it. And also, in fact, these whole sections can split out and then it can let water in. In fact, we've had this issue with this particular car, so we've had to put brand new lights in, and they've cost just over £1,100 including VAT for those two lights. I'll show you the originals, because it's quite a shocking thing when you see it. So as you can see, these were the originals. They've got sort of like mold growth there from where they've let water in through this section here. It's actually, I don't know if you can see that, but basically these two sections are split away. Maybe the other one's easier, but it was the same issue on both. You can see it's not flush. There's a step there because that bit's split off, and when you do actually manipulate it, you can see that it's flexing open, and there was just a whole load of water in both of those. Still working and still look okay, but they don't look as they should from the factory. Once I've checked all those bits, I'll then go through and check wheels and tyres. So check the age of the tyres as well. So you can check the tyres, because in most cases they have this DOT, and then they'll have in this little cylinder here, this sort of like pill-shaped thing, they'll have the week and the year. So that's week 24 of 2024. So we've just fitted those. So check that all the tyres, you can verify the dates. Check that they're ideally N-rated as well. So these are N2s, and they ideally should match the front. So they're Pirelli P0 N2s. These are Pirelli P0 N2s, so they're the same. Check the treads, but not just the outer ones, also the inner side, because quite often they will wear first on the inner ones, and quite often you can have a decent tread on this outside too, but the inside can be completely worn out, and in fact it could be all the way down to the cords. We've actually seen that on a few cars, particularly 911 turbos, where they do excessively wear the inner edge rather than the outer. Check the discs and pads are in good condition. Check the MOT history, because quite often that's the thing that's advised. You'll see brake discs are pitted and scored. That could either be the car hasn't been driven very much and they've sort of rusted up, but they could potentially clear away with a good drive where you use the brakes, or they could actually be worn to the point where they need replacing. Again, it's not the end of the world if you need new brakes, you just have to factor it in. Then I'll check the coolant pipes for any corrosion on them on both sides. So it's ideal to use a torch, because then you can point it directly at where you're trying to look for any sort of corrosion on those joins there. Obviously look for any puddles. These cars use the pink reddish coolant. So once I've done that, I'll then go into the engine bay and just check the coolant level, check that it's still nice and pink and it's at the correct level. Just look for any evidence of any issues that up here, and then underneath you want to look for any staining on the sump pan. You can also check the exhaust gaskets and bolts there, if they're still secure, if anything is looking like it's going to come off. You'll quite often find that those gaskets and bolts are very rusty, but as long as they're secure, nothing's come loose, they will be replaced. On Gen 2s particularly, you have to take all of those off to do the spark plugs, which is every 4 years. They will be renewed at that point, so that does increase the cost of the major service on a Gen 2, because you have to take off quite a lot of stuff to get access to the spark plugs. And then you might also find you need to replace heat shields, or at least renew the fastenings for the heat shields, because they might have corroded away. Now this car had the aftermarket Zun Sport grills fitted, however the air conditioning condensers were corroded in the corners, and you can, if you shine a torch into the corners of them, it's not going to be clear with the grills in the way. If they're looking slightly damp in the corners, then it could be that the condensers are on their way out and need replacing. These ones needed to be replaced to get the air conditioning system working. It wasn't working at all. So also check all of the lights work. And obviously when you check the air conditioning system, ideally check it when you're actually driving, because then it's when it's working most effectively. If you just do it while you just start it up and it's standing still, it won't necessarily kick in as effectively as if you're on a drive. So just put it on its lowest setting on the temperature, and then you'll be able to feel if it feels around sort of 4 or 5 degrees ideally. So it should feel like opening a fridge. That's 4 degrees Celsius. And then once you've done all that, obviously go on a test drive, make sure there's no knocks and bumps. We quite often have to replace a lot of suspension components. So this car needed one lower arm. We've replaced both, obviously, because we replaced them in pairs. It needed the top mounts. So the top mounts here are brand new, and the bump stops are all new as well, because the rubber had started perishing and the bearings weren't in great shape on those top mounts. There's the lower arms here and all of the connections here that need checking as well. And you'll hear if a car is knocking just after bumps, then you know that either it's anti-roll bar drop links, top mount, or lower arms. And you can normally hear which corner it is. You normally do things in pairs. So if you've got a leaking damper, then you'd ideally do both on the front or both on the rear, depending on which one it is. And you'd also do a four-wheel alignment. So this car had to have a four-wheel alignment after doing that suspension work. When you start it up, there might be a little bit of smoke, but there shouldn't be an excessive amount of smoke. This car's completely cold. You can see there's no smoke. There might be a puff once it starts getting going, because it's got an exhaust gas recirculation system. So it's basically, unfortunately, putting the exhaust gases back through the engine, which makes it look a bit smokier. But this car's actually very good. Even on a cold day, it's only 12 degrees in here. And the engine rev should settle down after around a minute or so. See there, you've got a bit of smoke coming out now as the exhaust gas recirculation is doing its stuff. But that's not classed as excessive, that's just given the temperature today. The humidity, 66%, is quite high, so you will see steam, but basically it should then largely clear up, and when it's fully warm it should be blowing completely clear, as long as it's not a really cold day. So you can hear that the revs have settled. As I said, check all the lights and everything, check all the sat navs working. It's quite handy. If the sat nav looks like it's in the wrong location, you can actually check how many satellites it's actually talking to. So you press the info button and then you click location info, and it tells you it's talking to 6 satellites. If that said 0 and you're outside, more than likely the GPS module, which is located under the front bumper in that front section there, has failed, or the wiring to it has failed, so that will need replacing, and then that will basically be able to recalibrate itself and have an accurate location there. Check the CD player, people forget to do that. Check all the various bits that are in these cars, cup holders, glove box, check that nothing's broken. And obviously on the drive, try it in the full auto, full manual, try the different sports modes as well, that they engage as they should. And then once it's warm, you'll also be able to check the oil, but this car hasn't got a warm engine right now. So using this stalk here, you can also check the service interval, so it's due in 722 days because we've just had it serviced. Check all these interior lights as well, sun visors. Basically just be as thorough as you can at just checking that everything is working as it should. And then check all the bodywork as well, so check for any uneven colours in the paint going from panel to panel, anything that's sort of slightly out of shape where maybe filler's been used under the paint. I mean, with a car like this, I think it's unrealistic. This car's just done 57,400-ish miles. It's unrealistic to expect a car like this, that looks like this, to have not had paint at some point, for stone chips particularly, but also the odd scrape when it's parked up. Potentially someone's just run into a bumper very gently. So I would typically expect the rear apron, which is plastic, that would have been resprayed. The front bumper would have been resprayed. And quite often Porsche cars like this that went through the Porsche used car network, so being sold on a Porsche OPC's forecourt, will have, if it had more than 2 or 3 stone chips across the whole car, they would typically respray at least the whole front end. So we're talking about front wing, front bonnet, front bumper. So you might see a slight colour differentiation between the whole front and the doors at the sides, so that front leading edge, because that's where they would basically stop. But even then, some have gone even further and basically repainted the whole car except the roof. And then if someone scraped the roof with I don't know, running keys across it, or putting a handbag on it, or a coffee and it slightly dented it or something, they would have even resprayed that. So potentially the whole car could have been resprayed by Porsche just to literally put it on their forecourt, because they've got quite stringent criteria on stone chips. And that might have been 5 years ago, and there's absolutely nothing sinister with the car. It's just for the aesthetics, it was resprayed just very, very carefully by a Porsche main dealer. So do watch out for that. And I would say it's not the end of the world if the car doesn't have original paint. And then the other things you want to check, so in the front boot or frunk, you also want to check that the heating works. So turn up the temperature once it's warmed up to make sure the cabin does warm up. Check the heated seats if it has them. Check for any excessive corrosion around here. You do sometimes get a little bit because you've basically got a steel fastener, but then you've got an aluminium bonnet, and you'll get electrolysis in this area here. But just check that's not too excessive. Everything's still solid. Check that those struts are keeping the front boot open. Check all the fluid levels, so you can obviously check the brake fluid there, it has the level there. You can check the condition, the physical condition of the battery by lifting this panel here, and then also you can lift all of these sections here. They're just held on with Velcro to make sure that the wings haven't been disturbed, because these screws here are all where the wings mount. You can also pull this section off. I'm not going to do it in this video. You can pull that off, and then you can see all the mountings and all of the crash structure behind this polyurethane bumper here, to make sure that nothing's been hammered back into place. And you can actually go as far as taking all these carpets out and checking that the tub looks original. Under this section here, you will see that there should be the original chassis number, and it should not be disturbed. It should have like a clear coat across it just to protect it, and make sure it matches the one in the windscreen and also all the paperwork as well. This section here will commonly be very dirty. We spend a lot of time just cleaning these out, checking that the drainage, so there's drainage points. There's 4 of them. There's one there. They shouldn't have any leaves in ideally. And there's one there, just in the bottom there. And they should be flowing so that there's not water sitting on that shelf, which could potentially end up in the car. Check that it's got all its tools in the 4-wheel drive models. It's under here. Check that it's got its warning triangle, which we would have had from new. And then they should have a tyre compressor, whether it's a triangular one like in a 4-wheel drive or a square one. And then all the tools there. And check that the locking wheel bar also still works. It should have tyre gel there. Quite often that'll be out of date now. Most people don't use that, but they do have an expiry date on them. If the car's under warranty, it needs to have that in date as well. So there's the VIN number in the window. There's also one in the door on a sticker here, which also tells you the tyre pressure. So there's a sticker here for tyre pressures, and it should also say the colour. So here we've got colour M7W meteor grey metallic, so that's the original sticker for this car. And then you've got the chassis number there for this car on that sticker there. When you plug these into diagnostics as well, like we do, you can also check electronically the car is as it should be. So the engine number, the VIN number, all of the options are also stored on these cars with an appropriate diagnostic system. You can look all of that stuff up. I think that's pretty much all of my sort of buying tips for someone who's looking at one of these lovely Targas. If you have any questions about buying a 997 Targa of any model, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Please do like and subscribe also. Thank you for watching.